Thank you so much for having us here today. Brad and Megan from the Mo Engage team, we're so happy to be joining you. As Brad mentioned, my name is Ashley Scorpio. I'm the VP of Partnerships at Hawk Media. I'm joined today by my colleague, Lindsay Breeden, who is our SVP of Services at Hawk Media, who oversees all of our service offering here at Hawk Media. For anyone who doesn't know, Hawk Media is a full-service digital marketing agency and outsourced CMO consultancy. We are based here in the United States with offices in LA, New York, and Boston. And over the course of the pandemic, we've actually spread out across the US. So we're now fully remote in 22 states and counting. So perhaps socially distant, coming to a city near you. And yeah, like Brad mentioned, we're here today just to discuss the topic, how poor experience engineering kills conversions. So I think we wanted to start opening up this conversation, talking about that experience on site to give everyone here in the audience some ideas as to what you can implement on your own site and what you should be thinking about and having top of mind when you're trying to ensure the most optimal conversion rate on your site and the best experience for your customers. Lindsay, is there anything else you'd like to add about yourself or Hawk Media before we jump into it?
Nope, I think that's great. I would say, my background is on the creative side as well as digital marketing. So I have kind of been building websites for a long time, focused on user experience. So excited to dive in a little bit today.
Awesome. Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me when we're talking about conversion rate optimization and sites and engineering and what have you is load times and load speeds. I think that is one of the first and immediate things that can kill conversions. Technically, I guess, before people even really get on site. And so one of the interesting statistics that I found is that the ideal website load time for anyone that doesn't know for a mobile site is actually just 1 to 2 seconds. And that over 50% of mobile site visits are actually abandoned if the site takes more than 3 seconds to load. So even just a 2-second delay, different merchants are seeing those abandonment rates over 87%. So it's absolutely astronomical. And this is probably one of the first things that anyone should think about when they're putting together their site. Lindsay, do you have any other thoughts on load times and perhaps how a merchant or store owner can set up their store to ensure that it loads accordingly?
Yeah, absolutely. Speed is critical. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that. One is image size, making sure that you compress your images using caching, leveraging a CDN, which is a content delivery network, which will help speed up the load times. Also, leveraging things like Google page speed and, understanding where there are areas that you can improve, whether it's minimizing JavaScript. It basically will spell out everything that you need to do in order to increase your site speed. Additionally, there are plugins. One of our partners is NitroPack, which we actually use on our own Hawk Media website. They're specifically for WordPress at the moment, but they are working on a Shopify version as well. And NitroPack is really incredible. We were hovering about a 70% mobile page speed score for the Hawk Media website. And after launching NitroPack, we went all the way up to a 99. So we saw incredible improvement there. And it really does make a difference. Even that 20% increase that we had really helped our overall bounce rate and seen success and improvement there as well.
Awesome. And for anyone that doesn't know, can you talk to us a little bit about AMP? For anyone that doesn't know, AMP is Accelerated Mobile Pages. Lindsay, can you tell us more about what AMP is, whether or not merchants should be considering AMP or other options like you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, AMP's great. Kind of the new, I would say, direction that we're seeing web technologies and websites going is more kind of in the headless side of things as well. Where you basically take out the main core of the site. So we'll use Shopify as an example. You're actually taking out the commerce engine component, and you're putting another layer on top of it that is PWA, progressive web app. So that is basically the connector between the front end of a site. So you can basically, build a mobile app. You can build as many different pages as you want and have a quick, seamless experience. So as opposed to currently where you're actually pulling, you're talking to a database, you're printing everything out. You're actually just with the PWA and the headless, you're actually just printing the HTML. So it's a quite fast experience. It's still a little bit in its infancies, but I would say in the next 18 months, we're going to see a huge movement towards headless.
That makes a lot of sense. Can you just define headless again really quickly for anyone who might not know? Obviously, there's so many different e-commerce platforms, and now this new trend is headless. And what does that really mean?
Right. So it really means just separating the platform itself from the front end user experience. So whether you're using WordPress or Shopify, you're actually able to create a front end experience for the user that is quick, seamless, and doesn't have to load every single thing in that is part of the platform, which is why pages are so slow generally. You're actually removing that layer completely and using the progressive web app, which is basically like an API layer that sits in between.
Great. So it sounds like there's a lot of benefits to headless, like reducing this load time that we now know and we've shared with you all is so crucial. In addition to that, it just lets you do a lot of different customizations on your site, which might be something you want for a variety of reasons. If you're trying to, have more control over the look and feel and the actual user experience itself. Something else that we see come up quite frequently beyond load time is now more and more increasingly ADA compliance. And I think that this is extremely important and something I wanted to bring up, not only because, it can be so litigious, at least here in the United States, and merchants that are not ADA compliant are opening themselves up to potential lawsuits and liabilities, but also because, of course, there is a segment of your perhaps customer base or existing audience that really needs these tools and this accessibility to actually be able to read and comprehend or hear your site. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of compliance for merchant sites these days, and what does it entail, and how can a merchant become ADA compliant?
Yeah, great question. So if you go back, I think it was about 10 years ago, there was Section 508, which was like kind of the original ADA compliance. Since then, it's evolved. And now they have what's called WCAG, WCAG, and there's 3 different levels of that. What this allows you to do is if I'm blind or if I'm deaf, it still allows you to have a great user experience on site, which is very important. There's a couple of different ways that you can go about becoming ADA compliant. It's a very complex and difficult process to do manually, it can be done. And then you have to kind of go and test and verify. And then there's great partners like Accessibility, which is actually just a plugin that will instantly make you ADA compliant. You're allowed to create your own user experience with someone with disabilities. So basically, when you install the plugin, there's a little icon that appears on the page. And when you click on that, it allows you to create the experience that you want based on your disability. So we at Hawk have done several manual ADA compliance for websites, but recently we've actually moved solely over to Accessibility just because it's such a wonderful platform and it makes it instantaneous to become ADA compliant.
Awesome. I think that's a pretty good takeaway for any of the merchants here in the room that might not yet be ADA compliant or might not even have realized that that was something that they should be looking out for and paying attention to. One of the other things I wanted to talk about today, and I think is so important, especially with our partners, MoEngage here hosting us, MoEngage has many different capabilities, but one of their core offerings covers website personalization, whether that's showing banners and content that change dynamically, whether it's based on the historical behavior of the user on the site, or, offering discounts to any price sensitive customers, or of course, inversely recommending sort of premium products to loyal customers. There's so many possibilities when it comes to personalization. Can you tell us more about the importance of personalization Of course, on site, but also across your different marketing channels these days?
Yeah, personalization is very important. It really can make a big influence on how you shop and who you transact with, right? And keeping that continuity across all your marketing channels is important as well. So, leveraging the data is important too, beyond just the personalization. So understanding, what my journey is throughout the site, what are the most important products for me specifically. If I put in a search term and I come to the site via that search term, actually putting that content in front of me first that I'm looking for. So the more you can personalize, the better the experience and the higher conversion rates you will see.
That makes a lot of sense to me. On that note, again, beyond on-site, there's a lot of different ways that personalization can manifest. And so, you can have mobile push notifications, you could have SMS, you could have web push, you could have in-app messaging, you could have on-site messaging. How important do you think those features are? Does a brand need to take all of them on at once? Is there one that you would say is crucial or that they should start with? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of success with kind of on-site messaging in terms of chatbots, for instance, giving incentivizing offers, exit intent pop-ups, right? So if I'm leaving the site, they'll try to capture me with an offer. Those things are all important. You can absolutely throw the kitchen sink at it, but it's also good to kind of start and prioritize, what are the most important on-site experiences. Generally, any sort of lead capture is great. Doesn't matter if you're B2C, B2B, but having a lightbox or some way to capture people's information, whether it be through Messenger or email, definitely a great way to not only engage your user base, but also grow it as well.
You bring me to what was going to be my next question anyway. When it comes to light boxes, this is sort of the age-old question, yay or nay, when it comes to not just the intention-based or exiting the website, but when they immediately load the site, yay or nay for an email capture website off the bat. What are your thoughts on that?
Generally, I'm a fan of delayed lightbox. So after a certain time on site, you can present that lightbox. We found that generally the bounce rates will be higher with a lightbox right off the bat. So giving people a little bit of time to absorb the brand and the experience, and then present them with a lightbox generally finds the biggest success.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Even as a consumer, it can be a bit off-putting. You've just loaded this site, you're excited to look at some products, browse around, and boom, suddenly you can't react with anything else on the page. And you might even be frustrated to have to click out of it and just close the whole tab, So something to keep in mind when you're thinking about building your site and your pop-ups or any other on-site experiences, always keep your consumer, your end user in mind. And what would they like to see? What would engage them? What would work well? So I think that's the number one thing to think about here as the merchant is putting them first. When it comes to this experience, how do you view customer service? So you talk about chatbots, but what are your thoughts on live chat options and maybe having a real person on the other end of that little chat window?
Absolutely. So I think, for the chatbots are becoming so advanced now, you can load them up and there's enough artificial intelligence in there to get to a certain point where you're actually thinking that you're interacting with a human, but there becomes a limit of where that stops. And I think that's when it then gets passed on to a real human. It's always important to have real humans behind the scenes somewhere to help with the customer service and communication. But for the most part, I would say 85% of the questions can be answered via chatbot, and they're just getting better and better. And the communication, you for the most part can't even tell it's not a real human.
Totally. That makes a lot of sense. Now, when it comes to contacting the brand, oftentimes in this new age of technology, an actual phone number is buried or hard to find. And of course, there are some consumers that might actually like that human touch, that would like to call in with questions or about a return or something like that. What are your thoughts on the FAQ page or the contact us? What are key elements that should be presented, and where?
Yeah, I always see the FAQs as kind of an organic, dynamic piece of content that should always be evolving and changing. Leveraging and understanding what are the most common questions that are coming in, and really staying on top of those and adding and creating kind of just a very robust place for all of the questions and answers that people will have. Ideally, you would have a phone number, but that can also get very expensive from a people cost standpoint, and not always the most efficient. So the more you can give people, from on the on-site experience, the better.
Definitely. And you and I, as digital marketers, we know how important having a blog on site can be, at least for SEO purposes. How does it impact the customer journey? Are there ways that brands can, take their blog to the next level to make it an important part of telling their brand story, or, giving a better in-depth description of their product lines or launches or drops?
Yeah, definitely. I think, the most important thing about if you are going to have a blog is that you blog often and you keep up with it. The last thing you want to do is start blogging and then forget about it for 6 months. It needs to be current, needs to be up to date. The other area that we're seeing a lot of success with, on-site engagement around, blog posts and stuff is video. Video is a great way to engage your customer, to kind of wrap them around your brand and get them excited. So we've seen a lot of success with creating short form videos for brands, and kind of placing them on their site, obviously out in the world, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all that good stuff. But having that on site is a great way to build not only brand trust, but get them excited about the brand as well.
You bring up a great point with videos. So not only owned assets that the brand creates, but what are your thoughts of brands incorporated UGC or user generated content from perhaps some of those other social channels, and of course with the creator's permissions, repurposing it and hosting it on their site as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously getting permission is important to do that, and then also generally not recommending people do live UGC. We've seen that go pretty poorly in the past. So really curating what you're getting, who you're using, do your due diligence on the content creators to make sure their brand's safe for you. But yeah, it could be a great way to bring people onto the site and potential new customers who might not be familiar with the brand, but familiar with the content creators.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Now, since we're talking about user-generated content, another form of user-generated content is reviews. And so, as I'm sure we've seen, especially over the course of the pandemic and in this age of Amazon and other marketplaces, reviews or some kind of third-party validation seems to be a key driver for sales for a lot of brands and businesses. And so I think there's a couple different key things that brands should think about when it comes to curating, not just collecting, but also curating the reviews. Can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of reviews and why a brand might want to have those on site and what some of the best practices are?
Yeah, absolutely. Brand trust is one of the most important things. Most consumers, as they're going in to purchase a product, check the reviews. They want to see, is the product good? Am I getting what I'm purchasing? So it's critical. Every site that is selling a product should have customer reviews in there. One of the most simple ways to do it is leverage a platform like Yotpo that has reviews and ratings. It also allows you to help collect them and as Ashley said, curate them. Very important, and pretty simple now. In addition to the ratings and reviews, you can also create things like a loyalty program, referrals. So there's a lot of different things that you can do around brand trust with a partner like Yotpo.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen a lot of success with that on on our different brand merchant sites that we work on. I also think that over the course of the pandemic, we've seen so many shifts in the industry, and we've seen this astronomical rise in e-commerce. And reviews are a big part of that mid-funnel consideration stage of the buyer journey. And last year, there was just really interesting statistics around how, for example, a lot of people, their biggest buys of the year are often around the holidays in December. However, the sort of research and consideration phase seems to get early and earlier every year. And last year, in part due to the pandemic and people being self-quarantining at home or in lockdowns, they saw their earliest year yet. So for anyone who doesn't realize, a lot of consumers started their holiday research and purchase planning in April of last year. And of course, reviews are a big part of that. So if you don't have reviews on your site, you might want to reconsider. And of course, that's also an important part, perhaps, of your customer journey post-purchase, is actually asking for a review, asking for feedback. And of course, it's also important too, because if the consumer responds with a negative review, perhaps you should be reaching out to them from a customer service standpoint and see how you can make it right, or how you can make it better, or, if you can replace their order or what have you. So don't think that the user experience stops after or at the purchase or conversion event. Ideally, you want a great customer journey where you are filling up your digital marketing and conversion funnel, and of course, ideally refilling it with those loyalty and rewards programs that Lindsay briefly touched on. So just all food for thought on that point. Since we are talking about purchase and post-purchase, I wanted to talk a little bit about the actual checkout part of a site. What are key things that should be available or part of the checkout process for optimal conversions? Should there be autofill options, a login option? Should be a forced login option? Should there be a social login option? What are your thoughts? What are the best practices here?
All the options. Just kidding. No, but seriously, having the ability to guest checkout, have the ability to create an account and save my information, having Amazon Pay, having Google Checkout, having all the different things that are available, Apple Pay, etc., to give people all the options that they want to check out. And one of the really important things and kind of opportunities is around kind of the follow-up after purchase, right? So where's my order? So, leveraging things like Facebook, for instance, right? You can actually just in Messenger quickly see where my product is, track the package. Adding features like that can really go a long way with not only having a great experience, but getting people to come back and shop again by providing a seamless checkout and a way to track their orders efficiently post-purchase.
Yeah, and two others that I see very commonly used and also partners of ours are, of course, the Shop app, native to Shopify and that ecosystem. And of course, our partners over at Root, because this is increasingly something that people want to see is as they purchase to on their mobile device, have an app that can show them across all their different sites and all the different merchants that they're buying from, where is my order, Waymo, right? That's one of the new buzzwords in digital marketing. So yes, I think that's absolutely something that's top of mind for consumers. And of course, there are so many of these options that are completely free for merchants. So there's almost no reason why you shouldn't be incorporating that into your site as well. Since we're on sort of the checkout phase, are there any other features or options you think that should be included beyond the ones you mentioned? I have one that comes top of mind, so maybe I'll share that first and we'll see if anything else comes up for you, Lindsay. But we have another fantastic partner called EcoCart, and it's a simple checkbox when you're at that purchase stage in the checkout process that enables the consumer to pay a small extra nominal amount, usually under $1, to make their entire purchase carbon neutral and offset that. And, we've seen sustainability come to the forefront of the industry, and in particular for younger consumers like millennials and centennials or Gen Z, as they were commonly referred to as. So that is often considered to actually be an on-site conversion rate optimizer as well, because this is really aligning with some of these consumers' values and what they want to see from brands. So is there anything else that you can think of that might be beneficial to include in that checkout process?
Yeah, very similar to what you just described, but around social impact. I mean, depending on your brand and your demographic, having a product that is associated with a social impact can go a long way. There's a partner of ours called Pledgeling that actually does this. So it's an out-of-the-box Shopify, WordPress, WooCommerce plugin that allows you to attribute a specific product or many products to different charities that you choose. And it's a really great way to set up a social impact. And they have things like counters that say, this many products have been sold, have, planted this many trees, or whatever the social impact is. But it's a great way to get repeat customers as well.
Awesome. Yeah, fantastic. I think it's so important to be thinking about social impact, your brand mission, making sure the experience you're offering the customer actually aligns with the values. So you're actually walking the talk, if you will, because we see a lot of these things talked about in a lot of marketing campaigns that got a lot of attention and acquire a lot of customers for some brands, but then you actually want to follow through on whatever promise you're making to those customers. You don't want to let them down. Speaking of partners, and of course, our fantastic partners here at MoEngage who are hosting us today, one of the other features that MoEngage offers is geofencing. So I was wondering if you could speak to us more broadly about geofencing when it comes to sites, because we did talk a little bit about personalization. And of course, there are ways that you can even personalize based on geography. So did you want to talk to us a little bit about how merchants can use a feature like that on their site?
Yeah, so geofencing is a great way to get specific with a certain area, a certain demographic. So actually leveraging content that's relevant to that particular area is a great way to use geofencing to your best ability. There are certain products that you can't necessarily sell, whether it's alcohol or cannabis or some of those type of products. So that is where geofencing comes into play as well. So yeah, it can be a great tool for getting very specific with the content that you're showing people.
That makes a lot of sense. And actually, good thing you mention it, because some of you here might not know that at Hawk Media, we actually are one of the leading digital marketing agencies when it comes to cannabis and CBD in particular, which a lot of our next competitors actually won't touch and won't work with those merchants because it can be complicated. And it touches on a lot of those areas that I mentioned earlier about compliance in the sense of ADA compliance, but here in the sense of federal and local jurisdictions and regulations around that. Lindsay, are there any other restricted categories or verticals or sub-verticals that merchants should be aware of if they might be in them when it comes to setting up their sites, that you might just rattle off some examples for us so that if anyone's in those areas, they can keep that in mind?
Yeah, health and wellness is another one that can be tricky sometimes. A lot of, approvals that need to happen from FDA and that sort of thing. The cannabis, as I mentioned, anything with THC, cigarettes, liquor, there's a pretty long list. But yeah, it's, we help to try to navigate some of that at Hawk Media. And we've had a lot of success, specifically, as Ashley mentioned, with the cannabis market.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know we're almost at our time here. So we hope that some of these thoughts that we all shared with you today were helpful when it comes to how a poor experience in engineering your site or your store can actually kill your conversions or your conversion rate. So thank you so much to Brad and Megan at MoEngage for having Lindsay and I from Hawk Media here today. If we have time for some questions, we're happy to open it up, but I'll let Brad chime in here on that.
Hey, thanks, Ashley. I'm sure it was a fantastic session for me personally. I learned a lot So for those who are listening to us, do shoot out your question on the Q&A window or on the chat to Ashley and Lindsay. So while we're waiting for others, Ashley, I do have one question. So from working with your clients, what are some of the things that you've heard, or hey, these are areas where we often see brands, fail or probably don't prioritize really well?
That's a great question. Lindsay, do you want to give Brad and everyone here listening some of the very common pitfalls to avoid when putting their sites together?
Yeah, I think people try to sometimes over-engineer, over-design things. There's the old adage of just keep it simple, right? There are just kind of standard best practices from a user experience angle that should always be followed. And most importantly is when we're talking about the products and the checkout, all of those things need to be fast and they need to be well engineered. So that to me is the most important thing.
Got it. Don't overcomplicate. Keep things simple and straightforward. Yeah, fantastic. And how about hey, these are top 3 things that you would recommend for anybody who is getting started with this?
Yeah, so for me, I would say again, focus on the user experience. Number one, like what is the journey from the time someone starts to till they check out and transact, right? Understanding what are all the touch points and what are all the levers that I can pull. That if you start there, that's the fundamental and the foundation that will create a good experience across the rest of it. And then it's just a matter of understanding which levers to use and when to pull them. And that's something that you can test, right? And leveraging the data that you're seeing and tracking and using that to test and experiment.
Got it. Ashley, would you add anything to what Lindsay already shared?
No, I think Lindsay pretty much covered it. Like I mentioned earlier in my comments, I think the number one thing is just keeping your customer in mind. Put yourself in their shoes and really think about what is the flow on your website. When someone does load up and land on that page, what is going to draw their eye first? Where are they going to go? And how is that going to play out? And you, of course, have to think about matching that back to perhaps the channel, or if it were an ad that got them there. So what did they see on that ad or in that copy or in that creative, and where did they land? So, if you have an ad that's very specific to a specific product line or a specific drop or discount or sale, you don't want them just landing on your homepage. That doesn't necessarily make sense. And again, you might see a really high bounce rate if you do that kind of thing. So it's all about matching your marketing to that on-site customer journey and that experience as well.
Awesome. I think that sums it up all. Well, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. It was fantastic